You found the skeleton. How would you tell people that is you personally? How would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on this.
Hey everybody, and yeah, I'm a professional. I definitely clicked onto the wrong scene and then had to change it real quick. That's okay. Take a drink for it. Yeah, well, you know, I make mistakes. It happens. Leave me alone. So yes, I am of course here for Dapper Reacts number 77, First Nation Creationism 2. I don't plan on there being a 3, even if we don't get through this whole thing, because look, we made our point. I have another video that is in the queue for Tuesday, actually, because we're back Tuesday this week. So let's see. You guys know the drinking rules. We're doing the drinking rules. So I just took one. I am drinking some coffee with some whiskey in it. What do you got there, Shanti? People have no idea why they're saying you're muted. You haven't said anything yet.
Right? Well, I mean, I got a little digging, but yeah, I didn't say anything up until, like,
I'm
digging on you for having to take a professional drink that early.
I definitely didn't just take a second one.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Don't worry about it. I'm on top of things. I know what's going on. He said, lying.
Yeah, so many people are like, hey!
No, Vishanti's definitely not muted. I don't know what anyone's talking about. She definitely wasn't muted. Vishanti's just... she's quiet today.
Okay.
Yep, it's uncharacteristic. It's, you know, not usual, but today, yeah, it's quiet. Anyway.
Oh, so you're saying I'm loud? Is that it? That my voice has a lot of decibels, that I have a lot to say, that I'm opinionated? Is that what that means to you?
Actually, in all of those cases that you just said, yeah, I think so. But that's kind
you're
of
right.
why you're here. It's literally why you're here, yeah.
I do have opinions about things, and they're very rarely in the middle of the spectrum.
Alright, guys, so we are here earlier. So we started with this video on Saturday, and this is a guy who is presenting Young Earth Creationism to a TV station that also uploads a lot of their stuff to YouTube. I think, like, it's not, I don't think it's a for-profit thing. I think they're taking, like, it's a non-profit organization. I'm not positive. It's called Tribal Trails. It's run by a group of people who are Cree, which is one of the Algonquin subgroups, and they're in Saskatchewan. And one of the things I said last time, and I want to re-emphasize here, is this is not a dig at the whole channel or everything they do, because I think they're actually doing some valuable stuff in terms of doing things like doing song translations and recordings in Cree, which is a valuable language preservation thing. Because if there's one thing that indigenous languages in North America need, it is more stuff being done in them to help preserve them, to give people a reason to continue to use the language. Because among the languages that are indigenous to the to North America, I was going to say United States, but Canada, Mexico, there's only a handful that are currently on a good trajectory to be here in 100 years. Right? There's not that many. Like, Nahuatl is in there, Navajo is in there, or Diné. But, like, there's really not very many.
Uto-Aztecan language family.
Yeah. It's just true. They are in the Uto-Aztecan. Hey, good job, Uto-Aztecan. You're hanging in there, buddy. So yeah, this is not just an overall, like, these guys suck, like I would do with AIG, right? I don't think anything that AIG has done has ever been valuable to anyone. But that is not what my take on Tribal Trails is. That being said, they are a Christian organization who has decided to be a Young Earth Creationist or Christian organization. And so we're taking a look at the Young Earth Creationist stuff. Yeah, because I don't have anything to say about someone like, oh, hey, we translated Amazing Grace into Cree. I'm like, good. More things should be translated into Cree, and I don't care what they are, really. Translate all the things. We got a few super chats to read before we get right into this. We got DM Google Debunker Wing for $2, who sent this at 6:09 p.m. last night. who says trails and tribulations with an attempt at a Godzuki emoji, which is not a thing that I have, but there is also an attempt at a Godzilla emoji, so we'll take a drink for that. Thank you very much. All right, Ghostwriter of Dapper's Fossil Guide to Dom or Sub. Sorry, Ghostwriter of Dapper's Fossil Guide, Dom or Sub, yes, because of course the existence of subfossils implies the existence of Dom fossils. It's just how it works. Says, another day in the spaghetti mines. Good luck. Thank you. Yes, those you know, yeah. I lost a cousin in those spaghetti mines. Mr. Cliff for £2 says, moo, moo, moo. I'm also realizing I did not actually remember to bring my donations thingy, so I'll fix that later. Don't worry about it. But anyway, I think we're ready to go back into this.
Firing on all cylinders today, aren't we?
Look, this is my first cup of coffee. I am severely under-caffeinated right now. It is like a problem. So that's what I'm going with. But do you have anything to add before we... Oh, right, that's why. Alright, well, I'll take another drink because that was silly. I'm trying to get the donations thing up, and then, you know, it showed up as a big gray square covering almost all the screen. Don't worry, everybody. I'll figure things out eventually. I'm going to hit play now.
Want sea creatures, that's a good place to hunt. If I really want to find a lot of plants, okay, then I'll say, have you got any Pennsylvanian deposits around here? Or in Europe, they call it Carboniferous Pennsylvania.
I was going to say, can you make him talk faster?
Yes, I can. So one thing I do want to point out, this is not he's going to go 1.3 speed. So one thing I want to point out is the Pennsylvanian and Mississippian divisions of the Carboniferous are specifically a North American thing. They are called the Carboniferous everywhere else in the world. So Europe, Africa, Asia, everywhere else in the world, that is the Carboniferous. Now, that's not on him. That is just a weird thing American, by American, I mean like North American, geologists have done. I don't know why they did it. Actually, I do know why they did it. Because in North America, it makes a significant difference in terms of like coal mining and oil exploration. Because you find different patterns that are significantly different in North America that doesn't really follow in other places because of the unique geological history of North America. That being said, it's still kind of annoying, and I still kind of hate it. And it just is what it is, right? Like, I don't have the power to change it, so what am I going to do about it?
I found the videos I was looking for.
Oh, nice.
Baruch Hashem.
Good job. All right, there you go. I fixed the donation thing. Now it's here. Anyway, here we go.
Europe, they call it Carboniferous, Pennsylvanian, Mississippian. That's where you can find a lot of great plant fossils.
But I mean, you can also find plant fossils throughout everything higher than that. The weird thing is, he's trying to do this, like, ecological zonation thing, right? Where the fossil record is actually the record of the flood going up higher and higher elevation. Which you would think would mean that we would find higher and higher elevation things as we go up in the fossil record. But that's not what we find, right? It is true that we see a progression onto land throughout from, like, the Devonian into, like, the Carboniferous. Okay, that's great. That's true. We're not getting a whole lot of plants in the Silurian. In the Devonian, we're starting to get some of the simplest non-vascular land plants. Into the Carboniferous, we're getting vascular land plants that can grow into, like, tree-sized things, even though they're not closely related to any modern trees. And then by the time we get to the Permian, that's the first time that, like, land ecosystems are recognizably similar to the way they are now in terms of, like, how many niches are available. What kind of biodiversity you're finding in things like forests or savannas or things like that, where we have numerous diverse ecosystems across the landscape. That's really coming in the Permian. But the problem is that we still find lowland things like aquatic plants into the Triassic, into the Jurassic, into the Cretaceous, all through the Miocene, the Eocene, Paleocene, which I don't know why I said them in that order, but whatever. And so it actually doesn't work because you still keep getting these low elevation organisms all the way through. Pillowpunk says, sorry I'm late, I just beat the Elden Beast for the first time. Well, hey, congratulations. I'm glad that Elden Stars didn't get you. So So I haven't beaten the. I haven't actually fought the Elden Beast since they let you ride Torrent in the arena, and like the whole time I remember the first time I was fighting the Elden Beast, I was like, why can't I ride Torrent? This is a giant open field of nothing. I mean, it's a pool of nothing, but whatever. Like this is the perfect fight for Torrent, and also I spend most of the time chasing down the Elden Beast. That's kind of not fun. And they were like, oh yeah, maybe we should have let you use Torrent, which everyone, as far as I know, was saying. So, thanks, FromSoft, thanks, Miyazaki, for letting me use Torrent in a fight that seemed like it was designed for Torrent.
And if I want to find dinosaurs, well, of course, everybody knows one thing that goes with dinosaurs is Jurassic.
I mean, yeah, but you can also find them in the late Triassic as well as throughout the Cretaceous. So, I mean, he's not wrong, but, like, you're leaving a bit out, buddy. Carnivore Frog just gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate that. It helps the channel. Let's take 5 drinks. Vishanti, what are you drinking?
Well, I'm actually going to go downstairs, and no matter what the state of the ice cubes, I'm going to dump them into the coffee that I made so that it will be coffee. So, while you're reading these, I'm going to go grab my coffee.
All right, well, they were gifted to Matthew K., Toblixon, Not a Summer Child, Amber Rumman, Dino Nuggies, and Midnight Sand. All right, here we go.
There's rock called Jurassic or Cretaceous or Triassic. They've got a lot of dinosaurs in it. And so...
Okay, so to be fair, he did then call out the Cretaceous and the Triassic. There is a bit of a wrinkle with the Triassic, in that you do not get dinosaurs in the earliest parts of the Triassic. It's really only towards the end of the Triassic you start getting the diversification of first theropods and sauropodomorphs. And it's unclear exactly where ornithischians come in. We have a very poor early fossil record of ornithischians, and in fact, some people have said that maybe Herrerasaurus, which has traditionally been seen as a theropod, might actually be a very basal ornithischian. And other people have even suggested that it might not even technically be a dinosaur. It might actually nest just outside of Dinosauria. And then other people have proposed that it's actually a very, very basal sauropodomorph. So, like, yeah, the base of the tree of Dinosauria in the Triassic is kind of confusing, and the dinosaurs are not taking up the dominant position in ecosystems that they'll later fill in the Jurassic. Those positions are still primarily taken up by pseudosuchians, like Poposaurids, Rausuchians, Aedosaurs, and all of these things are more closely related to modern-day crocodiles than they are to modern-day birds. They're sort of crocodile line archosaurs. And yeah, this is my excuse to like just spout information at you guys while this guy rambles on about nonsense.
There does seem to be kind of a pattern out there. Mm-hmm. You find certain kind of fossils in certain layers. And so once again, the evolutionist says, see, I told you so. You know, these layers and the different plants and animals you see in them, those are stages in evolution. Well,
I mean, that's oversimplified, but yeah, basically.
Charles Darwin wanted to believe that.
Welcome back.
He knew about it. Now, there wasn't a lot of study
Iced
going
coffee
on yet.
get.
Yes. Now, one thing is, people seem to think that Charles Darwin was like coming up with this idea of evolution. He wasn't. The idea that the fauna of the world had changed over time was pretty ubiquitous. In fact, most creationists at the time, even those who believed in special creation, found the fossil record such compelling evidence of change that they adapted what was called progressive creationism. Now, there's basically none of these guys left anymore. I don't think I've ever come across someone who was actually advocating for progressive creation. And no, it has nothing to do with progressivism as a political idea. The progressive creation is the idea that basically God has like different versions of the biosphere of the Earth, right? So like the Cambrian was like alpha version 1, right? And then by the time we get to like the Triassic, God's entering like the beta test phase. And then like throughout up until like humans come around, that's sort of like God's doing like pre-release, like these are release candidate Earths, but I'm not sure. And then finally God's like, okay, no, now it's good. Humans, civilization, Adam and Eve, Moses, Noah, Jesus, all that stuff. Go. And I mean, that was such a common idea that most of Darwin's religious opposition was from progressive creation. Sir Richard Owen, famous for opposing Darwin, as well as famous for, just getting a lot of things wrong, like his prediction that we would find that Archaeopteryx had a perfectly normal bird face, which, no, it didn't. Or his prediction that, apes didn't have, I think it was an amygdala. I think he said apes don't have an amygdala, and that's the difference between humans and apes. I'm not positive that was the organ, but I know he said there was an organ that humans had that apes didn't, and that was the difference. And so then basically, he was invited to a dissection of, I think, some ape. I think it was a chimpanzee or something. And they were like, see, here it is. And he was just like, well, how about that? But yeah, that guy was a progressive creationist. You have yourself muted this time. That is not a mute.
I know. I was going to say, are there any organs that humans have that other apes don't? Because I'm pretty sure the answer is no, but I could be wrong.
There are none that I'm aware of. The only realistic possibility would be, like, there's all these tiny little muscles here and there that do, like, weird, stupid things, like pull your ear back a little bit. Maybe some humans have an extra one of those here or there. So, yeah, other than that, I doubt it.
But he knew about that.
Oh, so the whole point there was, yeah, so evolution, or at least change through time and that being what the rock record showed, was a ubiquitous idea. It had basically just taken over the scientific community because it was so blindingly obvious. It really wasn't until, well, from the start of the geology being a real science, up until like the 50s and into the 60s, young Earth creationism wasn't a thing that even Christians were mostly talking about. Like, we hear a lot, we associate young Earth creationism a lot with fundamentalist Christianity. And the thing is, in many ways, yes, the word fundamentalist has lost a lot of its meaning as people have applied it to groups who are not associated with the original fundamentalist movement. Remember, originally, fundamentalist Christianity was a self-appellation. A bunch of people got together and they said, we are the fundamentalist Christians. These are the fundamentals of Christianity as we see them. And they put that out in a statement. They said, that's what we believe. We're the fundamentalists. Virtually none of them were young earthers. Virtually all of them were day-age types, which is sort of a related concept to progressive creation, but it's not quite the same. It wasn't until the Seventh-day Adventists really started pushing this inside their own groups and then spreading that out into other areas of conservative Christianity, especially in North America, that going back to saying, well, I guess maybe the Earth is young, became popular. Because now I have said that, young Earth creationism is a modern phenomenon, but it is also true that Christians throughout most of Christian history have thought that the Earth was probably, thousands or tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands or millions of years old. But that's because there was no real reason to think otherwise. And that's when, like, as far back as they could reasonably take history, so they just kind of went with it. And that's kind of what most people did, too. Not just people following Abrahamic religions. It was like, well, history goes back about this far. I don't know. Maybe that's about when the Earth started. And so it's weird to call someone a creationist when there was no other non-creationist option for them to adopt. Right? So, Cross-Platform Adventure, who's been a member for 60 months and is at the ambient level, says, part of the argument for Heterosaurus being dinosauromorphia is the hip sockets are not fully open. Yes, I agree. Then again, Ankylosaurs secondarily close them. Yeah, but Ankylosaurs are nested deeply within, like, Thyreophora. And so the most simple answer there is that they probably just secondarily started to close up those acetabula. But that's less likely for Heterosaurus, which is an extremely basal animal. It is barely on the dinosaur side in terms of just its overall. Well, okay, that's an exaggeration. If it's a dinosaur, it is the basalmost dinosaur that I've ever seen, that, as far as I know, has been described. So it's far less likely that it had secondary closing of the acetabula, and instead is more likely that it was something that branched off before the fully open or perforate acetabulum had really evolved in Dinosauria. Which is why I'm actually currently kind of leaning towards it's not even technically a dinosaur. But, hey, what do I know? I'm not a paleontologist.
And he was hoping, expecting that those layers would show changes from simpler creatures to more complex creatures. And they
could you just point upwards for me, Vishanti? Just a little bit. There you go. Thank you.
show, how an arm could evolve into a wing, or an arm could evolve into a flipper for a fish.
Yeah, yodeling. How would you feel, by the way, if in one of my videos I replaced the Jura Orchestra with Takeo Ishii?
Sure. A fish flipper
Yeah, okay.
could evolve into a leg for a land animal.
Just
Evolution, can go any way you want it to. And he was sure that that's what should be there. But his chapter.
I mean, it ends up being what was there, right? Now, I'll grant you, for most flying organisms, we actually don't have a good fossil record for the evolution of their wings from whatever they evolved from, usually forelimbs, but in the case of insects, even that's kind of up in the air. But for birds, we have an exceptional fossil record for the evolution of flight. Like, far better than we could reasonably expect, especially since many of the earliest bird-line animals that were, closer to modern birds than they were to, say, I don't know, like Deinonychus. They were pretty small, delicate animals. So, like, we shouldn't expect to find a lot of them, and yet somehow, for some reason, we are finding lots of them. And so, yeah, we have an amazingly smooth transitional sequence. We have really very few questions. One of the only questions is, like, when did digit priority shift in theropod embryology? And I don't know the answer to that, and I don't think anyone does. But, like, yeah, it's a very well-explained and very well-evidenced transition.
On fossils was called the imperfection of the geologic record. He called fossils the most obvious and serious objection to his theory of evolution. Wow.
Yeah, that's interesting. He did that in the first edition. We'll take a little bit of a drink. One of the things you notice, if you really dig into creationists citing Darwin, is that when they cite him on fossils, they always love to go for the first edition. They never like to go for the second, third, fourth, or fifth, or sixth edition, because there were 6 editions of Origin of Species. Do you remember why they always go for the first, not the 6th edition when it comes to fossils?
Because that one has the fewest revisions and updates based on, like, actual discoveries that were made since the first one came out. Stuff like more fossils.
Right, like Archaeopteryx specifically. Yeah, by the time the 6th edition came out, there had been more and more transitional fossils found, and geologists, whom Darwin was addressing in that chapter, were becoming more and more open to his ideas as that time was going on.
It's like that episode of SpongeBob where he's, raising the baby, and, Patrick is just like, oh, yeah, no, I help out around the house, and SpongeBob points to all the, like, the diapers laying around, like, and that's us with transitional fossils creation.
It really is. And it even was Darwin. Not to the same degree, but, like, that's the reason they're always going for that first edition. In the 6th edition,
now I want to put his face on SpongeBob and have, like, the creationist logos on Patrick.
And then
redo that as a...
Do it.
Do it.
So yeah, by the 6th edition, the section on fossils was much more confident on Darwin's part. He was like, yeah, look, we still have a long way to go. There's still a lot of missing transition that would be nice to have. And yeah, the fossil record is incomplete, which has never changed. No one has ever claimed that we have a complete fossil record. Here's one way you can tell. You know, a new dinosaur is described about every week right now. It has been that way for a few years. What that means is that we have not found everything that has even been fossilized, which means we do not have a complete record of all the fossils on Earth. And there's no good reason to think that everything that has ever lived has left at least one kind of representative in the fossil record. So it remains incomplete.
I submit to you that it will always remain incomplete.
Yeah, probably. I don't think it's ever. Yeah, I don't think we're ever going to find everything that was out there. And also, yeah, not everything got preserved. So yes, and so Darwin's saying that, but he's also saying, but hey, look, a whole bunch of the geologists who earlier were really skeptical of my ideas are now becoming much less so and even accepting. And he names some names. And you know that as, you know, a 19th century British gentleman, he wasn't just naming those names without their permission. These were people he was corresponding with.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
The total opposite of what everybody thinks. And what was the reason? One of the things he said was he knew about the complex creatures in the lowest known fossil-bearing strata.
Which aren't the lowest known fossil-bearing strata anymore. Darwin was only really dimly aware of what was in the Cambrian, and he was not aware of just how much was in the Cambrian, nor was he aware at all of the Ediacaran, which is even earlier. Like that, those fossils were not discovered until the 20th century. He didn't ever get a chance to know about those, and those are indeed simpler organisms that we have now. And we found things that look like the common ancestor of all bilaterians, that look like some of the first mollusk-like organisms to develop, that might not even be fully mollusks yet, We have things that look like they might be proto-arthropods that gave rise to later pan-arthropods in the Cambrian, which also then gave rise to the true arthropods. Like, we're actually finding all this stuff. What's actually happening in the Cambrian is that life that was complexifying throughout the Ediacaran is finally starting to become stuff that can be preserved relatively easily because it's getting harder parts. And also, we just happen to have some Lagerstätten, which helps a lot, which are just fossil beds that have really, really good preservation, unlike most areas with fossils. Because, like, you go to, like, where I'm from, the Morrison Formation, that is not a Lagerstätten. It is full of broken, weathered bones. Only some of the largest bones tend to be there. If you look at just the assemblage of bones that we have, you would think that the Morrison Formation was just like a park full of Allosaurus, and then every once in a while a sauropod or a Ceratosaurus would wander through. But we know that can't be the case, right? There must have been a whole ecosystem of varying sized animals, all filling various niches and whatnot. If you look at fossils, I mean, Allosaurus is number one, some sauropods, and then you get some Ceratosaurus. Not all that much else. But clearly that's not what the ecosystem was like. That's not how ecosystems work. And yet, when we get to, like, the Burgess Shale, we're getting some of the best fossil preservation in the entire fossil record. So, yeah, it's a combination of those two things. Better ability to preserve, as well as us being lucky and getting some Lagerstätten from that era.
Also, I concur with Matthew K. in the chat, who says, it's almost like scientists are working off an estimated number of species that have existed on Earth, and over 90% of everything that has lived has gone extinct based on the estimate.
Mm-hmm. And yet we know more living taxa than we do extinct taxa, which means we have not found everything. Not even close.
He was expecting simple creatures. He was expecting when you looked at an old rock, you know, at the bottom, that you'd find things.
There is no bottom. There really isn't, right? When Charles Lyell was going out and trying to figure out what the earliest rocks were, his conclusion was that there is no evidence of a beginning. You can't simply find the rocks that you're going to not find other rocks below. Right? You're going to have trouble digging before you run out of rocks. There's no bottom of the geological column. There's a bottom of the Phanerozoic. Sure. But those aren't the bottom rocks.
I'm sorry, I'm just laughing because it's like, there is no bottom, but it's like, hey, how deep have human beings drilled into the crust?
Few kilometers or something, isn't it?
And why do we stop?
Oh, because the drill starts seizing up because of the intense pressure and heat, and it's basically impossible to keep going.
Are excavations ever done that deep?
No. Paleontology excavations are almost always, like, right at the surface.
And it's like, look, let's pretend for a minute that you have some kind of crazy-ass, future-ass technology, and you could drill really far down and you could do archaeology like that low. Do you honestly think that anything would still be preserved, that it wouldn't just start, like, melting into the freaking mantle? Because, like, technically, if he wants to be, like, super pedantic, the rocks don't stop until you get to the core, so...
Okay, speaking of, like, melting and whatnot, there is a known ankylosaur skull that is actually plastically deformed because it was found in deformed rock bedding. And the bedding was deformed smoothly enough that the actual fossil itself follows the angle of the bending. And I think that's neat. And also, I love that exists, because if I ever meet Andrew Snelling, I want to punch him in the face with a replica of that skull.
Well, you know, he's actually obligated to, like, turn his other cheek.
True.
Slap him with that.
Yeah.
He has to, like, give you the other side.
It's in the Bible.
I don't make the rules.
Yeah. The author of that gospel wrote those rules.
Ronna K says, no, Dapper, they stopped because they accidentally found hell.
Yeah, or weird parasitic fungi in a much larger version of the Kola Deep borehole.
Yep.
I don't remember what that movie was called, but it was the plot of a movie, and I was always like, but the Kola Super Deep borehole wasn't nearly that wide.
Wasn't it just called Super Deep?
Yeah.
What's the name of it?
It was, yeah, I think it was actually Super Deep. But in, like, the movie Super Deep, this borehole is actually something you can ride an elevator into. And in real life, it was just a little hole.
It was like, like the size of, like, a pipe.
Right. You couldn't fall into it.
It's not like that big diameter.
What is that? What is that? I don't know what that is. It's an early stage of evolution. It doesn't look like any animal or plant I ever saw. No, exactly.
Oh, well,
the
if
opposite.
you haven't seen it.
Even Darwin knew that those creatures at the bottom are fantastically complex. One of the most abundant.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're already the result of billions of years of evolution, right? The Cambrian is after 3 billion years of evolution of life on Earth.
Dude, I watched a video this week wherein I learned, apparently for the first time in my life, that there were burrowing dinosaurs, which I got very excited about.
Yeah.
And also that what do they call it? The last universal common ancestor, Luca, is actually like only a few 100 million years into like the history of the Earth, which is freaking crazy. That is really soon in geological time, and that just blew my mind. And it also made me think about all the creationists and ID proponents who will shake and cry over this, because for them that's impossible. And I'm like, look, if life happens really quickly on a geological scale, that's cool. Gonna be yet another nail in the coffin for their nonsense.
Creatures is the nautilus. Well, a nautilus, is a shelled squid.
It's calling it a shelled squid is quite a stretch. It's not a squid. I'm not.
It's a shelled squid.
It's a shelled cephalopod. I'll give him that.
Yeah,
but cephalopod
but it's not a squid.
is synonymous with squid. Yeah, no.
And the one today is a small round one like that, but they have them as fossils as big as tractor tires.
No, they don't. They have
ammonites.
ammonites.
Does he think a cuttlefish is a fish? Because it's not.
No, it's not. But also, we don't have nautiluses that big. We have ammonites that big. But ammonites are now they're related to cuttlefish. Talk about nautiluses, right? The nautiloidea includes like the cerathites, also includes the ammonites, and those refer to differences in the suture as well as where the siphuncle is. So the suture, you can't tell it very easily from looking at the shell, but it's actually segmented. So as you follow the spiral back, that is basically earlier stages in the life of this organism. And it secretes new shell segments as it grows. And the shells they curve and they get bigger. That's how it has room to grow. But if you kept doing this, you would run into buoyancy problems if you didn't have a way to keep the pressure throughout the shell relatively even and relatively neutral. So what happens is, as the animal grows, it leaves behind a semi-permeable membrane that can allow gas to diffuse in and out based on its pressure, called a siphuncle. Now, where that siphuncle is in the shell, whether it's against the bottom or in the middle, can help you determine whether you have a nautilus or an ammonite. Further, ammonites have complex sutures between the sections of the shell. They're very zigzaggy, whereas nautiluses have very, very smooth sutures between the shell segments. They're not the same animal.
Sorry, the chat. There's Heather is saying that he's showing me a crocodile and calling it a horse, and then Cross-Platform Adventures follows that up with it's like calling a pangolin a shelled dog.
That's probably a little bit closer, but yeah, it's like pangolin is just shell dog. Goodness. Yeah, and
unless I misread that, it's typed pangolin, but I'm guessing that was meant to say pangolin, but whatever.
Also, I think I did mix
not
up
either way.
nautiloidea with ammonoidea. I think it's ammonoidea, which is the larger group that includes nautiluses and ammonites. And as we all know, ammonites are not allowed into the congregation of the Lord, not even unto the 4th generation. So
forever. Yeah.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
Ammonites.
Which is kind of funny considering later on who gets in the congregation. But it's fine.
Yeah,
fine. Ruth.
But when the Bible was saying no ammonites, it kept consistently using masculine nouns and pronouns.
Yes.
And Ruth was a woman,
yes.
So it's okay. It was only the boy ammonites.
This is literally one of the things that the rabbis comment on. That's how they get around that. They're like, oh yeah, well, I mean, grammatically, that's just like a masculine plural, and Ruth is a woman, so clearly she's fine.
Let's just ignore that, just like in most languages with a masculine and feminine gender system, that the collective nouns that include both masculine and feminine members are always masculine anyway. Just don't worry about that. In this case,
just unwelcome nuance.
Yes, exactly.
They're worth hundreds of thousands of dollars when they're polished up and so on. And they used to have long banana-shaped ones, 17 feet long. Just
No, those aren't
Chat's also
ammonites
saying-
or nautilus.
Degree is saying pangolin's probably shell dog in some language, and I concur with Max P, who's like, yeah, it's probably German.
Yeah,
If
probably
it was
German.
going to be any language, it would
Yeah.
most likely be.
Or maybe shell pig. They also like to name things after pigs.
Mm-hmm.
Schildschwein. There we go. There's a new German word for pangolin. If it isn't already the word for pangolin. It's either Schildhund or Schildschwein.
spectacular things that bring big prices at rock shows. And they're right at the bottom. They have an eye that sees the world.
Are they right at the bottom, my guy? Because actually, ammonites really don't occur until, like, the middle of the Mesozoic. Earlier cephalopods that have shells are there, but they're not ammonites, and they're certainly not nautiluses. I'm going to take a drink, because apparently, all cephalopods with shells are just the same thing, according to this guy, which isn't true. Guptu3 et al. Has another interpretation. He says, it says no ammonites. We're allowed to have one.
Yes! Yes! I am literally, the next time I'm in a mid-rush and somebody brings this up, I'm gonna be like, clearly it's fine, it was using the plural and she's just one person.
There you go.
Duh.
Anna points out that in Swedish, turtle is shield toad, which I adore, which is what I'm basing this on.
That's
by the way.
also
Yeah.
what it is in German as well.
Yeah.
Schildkröte.
Yeah, I am basing it on that fact about
One of
many
the
Germanic
very
languages.
few German words that I know.
Look, German has some of the best animal terms just overall. Like,
Wash bear.
Yeah.
It's cute.
it's
And
adorable.
it's accurate.
Yeah, German was like, look, we've only got about 8 or 9 basic animal terms, and we're not adding any more. We're just gonna keep adding on descriptions. It's fine.
Like we do. They have 3 hearts, arteries, capillaries, veins, a 2-hemisphere brain. In other words,
How many hemispheres can you really have? I feel like it's only 2. But okay.
That's kind of what hemi means, but you know,
Yeah.
whatever.
It's sort of weird. Hey, I cut
I've
this
got
banana.
3 hemispheres. Okay.
I'm gonna cut this banana into 3 equal halves. That's just what I'm gonna do. I feel like you're not gonna do that though, because that's not how words work. Also, here's a fun thing: cephalopods have their brain as a set of nerve ganglia that goes around their esophagus, which means if they swallow things that are too big, it can cause brain damage. And you thought having your
Oh. Go ahead.
oh, okay.
for simple animals, they are not.
I was going to
and,
say I
the
had an
cha-
ADHD
Oh, okay.
because I read something in the chat. Lebenswürdig Schüssel says Eichkatzen.
Wait, is that what pangolin is?
I don't know. Well, you're the linguist.
First, I'm not a linguist, and second, I've said many times that I am not great at German.
Change is actually you have all these animals at the bottom, and then the only thing that changes is how the shell attaches to the chamber cross wall. You never find any simple creatures. The sequence is not, one.
No, other things change, like the type of eye we find. We also have things like the position of the siphuncle. Lots of things change. You can watch the change from simple sutures to seriatitic squiggly sutures to like super complex squiggles within squiggles, plans within plans, fuck the lens rad ammonites. Yeah, that was just for you.
That's right.
Animal changing into another kind of animal or another kind of animal, one plant changing into another. It's
Take a drink for how
complex sea
dumb that
creatures on
was.
the bottom, followed by complex near-shore life forms in the next layers.
Except, again, that's
Oh
also
my
not true.
God.
Some of the earliest evidence we have of things like insects are very much more basal than what we have now. They're things that still have, like, long cerci coming out of the back, that don't have wings, that have very simple mandibles, that have only limited amounts of tagmatization in terms of actual body segments, like having distinct differences, right? Some of our earliest insects do not have strong divisions between, like, the thorax and the abdomen. So, like, it's not even true that he's saying that we just find the most complex organisms on land right away. We still don't. Now, is like a silverfish, which is roughly like what the first insects would have looked like. Is that a complex organism? I mean, overall, yeah, sure, I guess. But is it more or less complex than, like, an earwig, or a bumblebee, or a mantis? I'm going to say it's less complex than any of those. For one thing, it doesn't have wings.
Followed by complex lowland life in the next layers, followed by complex upland life in the top layers. What you're looking at in...
But that's not true, though. We have lowland and upland life starting way back in the Permian. Right? Like... Go ahead.
Before you start that explanation, I did want to inform chat that Google Translate told me that the word for pangolin is Schupentia.
I don't know how to parse that out into parts.
Nor do I.
Guys, you gotta fix that. Make it shield.
Lebenswürdig, help us.
Yeah.
Help us parse this word.
Tell any Germans who are listening, start a petition to change the name of the pangolin to shield pig. Just change.org or whatever it is in Germany. Like change.de or something, I don't know. Okay, so upland, lowland stuff, right? So one thing is upland creatures are always harder to find preserved because erosion tends to bring sediment from up to low, which means we're always mostly getting low elevation stuff in the fossil record. However, we can find other higher elevation stuff here and there. For instance, the Jakotchta Formation in Mongolia, probably relatively high elevation. It's a late Cretaceous desert deposit made of alien sand dunes. It's where the fighting dinosaurs were found, with Velociraptor locked in combat with Protoceratops, which is one of my favorite fossil finds. That was probably relatively high.
I thought for a second that you were gonna say Chakobsa, and I was like, ha ha ha. And then you talked about dinosaurs being locked in combat. I'm like, you know, I feel like this could be the makings for a good Dune joke.
I say the land
with them like taking their
time.
The Chris knife, and you know the Velociraptors like, may thy claw chip and shatter.
Ooh. Although I don't think keratin is usually hard enough to shatter.
Well, if you get it cold enough, almost anything can shatter.
True, but I don't think that late Cretaceous Mongolia was all that cold. Even late Cretaceous Alaska wasn't all that cold. It was cold, it snowed, but so
Fearmonger says, from what I can parse out from Google Translate, it's Schuppen, which means shed, and Tia is animal.
Shed animal? That's okay. Not great. Look, we all know that shield pig is better.
Yeah.
So Germans,
I agree.
Get on that. But yeah, we get very obvious, like we get things like cattails in the Cretaceous. Why do we get?
Wouldn't shield pig be more apt for like an armadillo, not a pangolin?
Why not both? I don't know.
Well, because like scales are more like for pangolin versus like an armadillo, which has more shield looking.
Fine, call pangolins an arrow pig. That'll work because their scales are kind of sharp looking. It's fine. Anyway, yeah, so we have lowland areas. Like, for instance, one of the last of the Cretaceous layers, or well, the last Cretaceous stage is the Maastrichtian.
Okay, here we go. So, Schuppen is also the plural of Schuppe, which is scale. So it technically is scale animal, so thank you, German.
All right.
You nailed it.
All right, good job on that one.
Okay. Sorry, I will stop now.
Well, Pillowpunk for $5 says, Dapper's actual class is still a YouTuber. The science subclass, he just took the linguist background for the extra proficiency.
Yes.
Oh, goodness. Yes. Thank you.
So now I need Pibblepunk to tell me what class I am, because I don't play D&D enough to, like, really keep any of this in mind.
You're some kind of a bard because of your music degree.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
It explains shitposting, too.
Yeah. Where was it? Oh, right. So we have things like, you know, like horsetail fern, or horsetails, lowland ferns, cattails, like obviously low elevation wetland plants all throughout the fossil record. We just have those things. But this guy's just like, oh, nope, increasing elevation. Where are the Permian cattails? Where are they? We have aquatic flowering plants from the Cretaceous on, and well as today. Why don't they appear with the earliest plants at the lowest elevation? It's where they live now. Are you telling me that lily pads were upland creatures until after the flood? Before the flood, you only had mountain lily pads? How does that work? Doesn't make any sense. The thing is, if that were actually a way to characterize the fossil record, if it actually went from low elevation to high elevation as you went up through the layers, then this might work. But it fundamentally doesn't. In fact, we have such lowland creatures that we have aquatic fossils from the Cretaceous and well into like the Paleocene and the Eocene and the Miocene, right? Like, why do we find whales in the highest layers in the fossil record, but we only
Dapper.
find...
I think the answer for you was just given by Robert Adsit, where cattails, well, they're attached to Permian cats.
Obviously. So, but yeah, why is it that we find whales way up high in the fossil record, but ichthyosaurs start out very basally at the Triassic, and then are common in the Jurassic and start dying out across the Cretaceous? Were ichthyosaurs in the lowland seas, and whales were in the upland seas? How does that work? What does that even mean? Don Giovanni Amir of Hakan, who's been a member for 1 month, notes that he's been a member for 1 month and is at the ambient level by sending a blank membership milestone chat. Thank you very much. All right, I'll hit play.
Clear, simple, unmistakable record, a mile deep in Grand Canyon is a...
I like how he just brushes over the fact that Actinopterygii was on his thing, expanding in diversity, only starting in like the Jurassic. And those are all fish, most of which are in the ocean, which, I don't know if you guys know this, but the ocean is considered to be low elevation. In fact, it's so low elevation that we kind of use it as the benchmark for where 0 is for elevation. So, you know, just don't worry about that. Those were upland fish.
Can't wait for those high elevation seas.
Yeah.
Like Cross-Platform Adventure says.
Yeah, we're just gonna find, like, God just put a big tarp over like a plateau somewhere, and he filled it with water. And I was like,
I mean, how do you think
whales.
Lake Titicaca got there?
That's it. You know, doesn't Lake Titicaca have like seahorses or something crazy like that?
Yeah, it's got some wacky, like, bunch of critters that live in there. It's just so wild. Like, that's a place I'm one of the highest.
It is the lake whose name is most likely to make any 11-year-old boy laugh.
record of Noah's flood. As the water, of course, the first Noah's flood, it was Noah's in the ark for 1 year and 10 days. And the waters continued to rise for 150 days until they covered all the high mountains at least 22 feet deep. So the ark could go right across the top of them. And so, of course, the first things to be buried would be the heavy-shelled bottom dwellers. That's exactly what we find.
But it's not, though. The first organisms that we find aren't even heavy or shelled. Right? The first thing we find are stromatolites. Those are just single-cell bacteria. Then in the Ediacaran, we find very few things with anything like a shell, right? We find all sorts of things that didn't really have hard parts at all. We only find them because they're reasonably well preserved in Lagerstätten. And then, by the time we get to Cambrian, we're actually first starting to see complex animals with shells. But they're still not as derived or as complicated as the ones around now. Like, what he's telling you is just wrong. Like, it's just not factually correct. It's not a different interpretation. It's not like, oh, well, if you put on your, if you take off your evolutionist glasses, you'll actually see that the evidence points this way. No, it's just not true. It's just like when someone tells you that 1 times 1 should equal 2, because an action times a reaction, or an action times an action should cause a reaction, and therefore multiply means to make bigger. So anytime you multiply things, they have to get bigger. And also, that was just a metaphor.
Please stop. My brain is just gonna like rip from my
You don't want
ear.
any more teriology? He's gonna revolutionize math, you know.
Sure.
And they're gonna let him play War Machine again.
Speaking of math that definitely works, today is the anniversary of the moon landing.
Hey, look at that. Maybe there will be another one someday. But it sure
There
as
will
heck
be.
won't be on
This keeps getting.
Starship.
But yeah, well, Artemis is going to go back to the moon.
I mean, I think it will. I just think it's going to take a lot longer than expected because NASA gave that contract to Elon Musk, and he's never going to deliver on that contract.
Yep. When are people going to learn? Like, really?
You know, I honestly don't know. The only thing I can think of is that maybe he was like whining and dining like NASA execs or something. Because I've seen some of the other proposals that were presented, and they were actually like rational proposals that could probably get done in the time frame. And then there's Musk like, no, I'm going to send a starship that's going to land vertically and be an extremely tall tower, and then there's going to be an elevator to lower people to the surface of the moon. Like, this is the worst idea
Okay, buddy, sure.
ever. And in fact, it's such a bad idea that really not much besides playing a little bit of Kerbal Space Program could tell you what a bad idea this is.
Yeah, I'll just wait for him to put that out after he finishes the Hyperloop that he was always definitely going to get done.
Yeah. And remember, as a general rule, if something does work in Kerbal Space Program, that's not a good reason to think it would work in real life. But if it doesn't work even in Kerbal Space Program, which is way easier than real space flight, probably won't work in real life either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, that game is just a whole lot easier than real space flight. So anything that's going to fail there will almost certainly fail in real life.
Not simple, complex heavy-shelled bottom dwellers, like the Nautilus. And then as that set up...
Also, the Nautilus doesn't dwell at the bottom. It dwells in the water column. There's a reason it has to stay neutrally buoyant. It doesn't just sit there like a clam, which also aren't found at the very bottom of the fossil record. In fact, we have earlier mollusks at the bottom of the fossil record that have paired shells at either end of their body, but they don't actually connect with a valve. And there's a whole bunch of area in the middle that is not covered by either shell. Almost like they're the ancestors of bivalves. Crazy, right? Oh, also at the bottom, we find bilaterally symmetrical echinoderms. So, because all the echinoderms you've ever seen alive, like sea cucumbers or sea urchins or sea stars, they all have radial symmetry. But their larvae are bilaterally symmetrical, and we have bilaterally symmetrical adult echinoderms in the Cambrian. The Fallen, who's been a member for 18 months, thank you very much, says, 18 months through the generosity of chat, thank you to all for letting me enjoy the quality entertainment, and thank Dapper for making it with a Mothra and a gross pelagic tunicate. Oh. Well, take a drink.
I think
anyway.
they're cute. Also, I'm waiting for Strawberry Vein to come into the chat so I can give thanks for the amazing nail polish and lip balm colors that were sent. One of them is called Pelagic Tunicate.
So gross.
Whenever I'm able to like handle my nails growing out a little more, I keep them very short. Like it's just a drummer thing and a martial arts thing. That they're always like way too short. But when you make fists for a lot of things, you kind of gotta. When they grow out a little more, I'm going to be wearing polarized. It off.
No, I'll have to disable your camera feed. It's the only option. It'd be like having 10 pelagic tunicates on screen at a time.
When it gets built up, then you can trap the
we
faster...
put 10 on screen right now.
No, don't do that. No one do that.
Swimmers.
Too
You
late.
get some fish in the bottom, but you get more fish farther up and different kinds that live closer to shore. And the kinds of corals change from the ones on the bottom to nearer shore.
No, all corals are shallow water, my guy. The fact that what kinds of reef-building organisms there are change so significantly can't just be attributed to the fact that some corals live deeper than others. We don't have those kind of other corals that you see at the bottom of the fossil record. We don't have scale corals. We don't have the kinds of things, the very large groups of organisms that were reef builders in the past just do not occur anymore. And they occur in shallow water marine sediment, the same kind of sediment that modern Cnidarian corals come in. You cannot explain this with ecological zonation. There were kinds of coral that existed at the time in the same environment as modern coral that just do not exist anymore. Whole orders of coral, just gone. And they lived in the same environment as modern coral. And we don't find modern coral in those reefs. You cannot explain that with ecological zonation. There has to have been some kind of actual faunal turnover in the same basic environment. Vendeli 1998, who's been a member for 45 months and was at the annual level, says, silly Dapper, nothing exists before the Cambrian, mainly because I don't think any of the young Earth creationists thinks or knows it exists, and thinks the Cambrian was 6,000 years ago. Yeah, that they do seem to act that way.
It's an ecological flood sequence.
It's
and then
really
you get
not.
the near shore plants. You get the lowland plants, lots of ferns and fern allies and tree ferns, and then you get the kind of plants that live higher in
Kyle
well-drained
Pratt
soil.
saying, okay, everyone add martial arts to Vish's skill sheet. It's been a very, very long time. Like, I haven't taken martial arts since I was in middle school, and the reason I took it is because I didn't make the dance team that year. I got the flu, and I missed tryouts, and I was really upset about it. But I needed some, like, extracurricular thing to do, so my mom let me enroll in a very, like, not well-known Korean-style martial arts type program, and for a while I could count in Korean, and I promptly forgot all of it, because I made the dance team, and then I took martial arts for, like, another year or two, and then stopped all of that. So I would not claim any of that on my skill sheet anymore.
But could you?
Thank you.
Could you beat up well-known martial arts expert Raw Matt?
At the time, probably, yeah.
Okay. Could you now?
I tell you who will kick someone's butt with martial arts, like who has a current working skill set, is Megan Lewis, Dr. Josh Bowen's wife.
I did not know that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was telling us that, like, he's 6 foot whatever, and she's, like, really short comparatively. And she just, like, walked up to him and just freaking hip checked him and, like, halfway across the room. So yeah, don't mess with her.
Nice. The South Geek X, who's been a member for 15 months, is at the Eminent level, says, me, yay, it's Dapper/Fish livestream. Also me, oh no, it's these fools again. And then Star Song for $5 says, young Earth creationists can't explain why the seabed on the top of Mount Everest is older than their supposed age of the Earth. Yeah, they really can't. And that is another thing, is they do not have a great explanation for that. And the problem is, you could say, oh, yeah, but, you know, the floodwater was all the way up there, so it makes sense with the flood, except that many of those fossils are in place as they grew as living organisms. So you're telling me that according to the flood geology, Everest was underwater for long enough for an entire multi-generational community of lamp shells and bivalves and fish and crustaceans and whatnot to develop, live their lives, die, reproduce, have their kids grow up there on Mount Everest, again, grow up, reproduce, and have this happen multiple times over multiple generations on Mount Everest, which only, according to them, rose up towards the end of the flood, all under the floodwaters, in the span of, like, what, 3 months? No. I'm sorry, but the generational lifespan or the generation time for, like, a clam or a lamb shell isn't 3 months. Especially when you get to the larger examples that are on there, because while many of them, none of them are as large as the creationists like to talk about, because they're just talking about concretions, because they don't know anything, there were still some fairly large clams there.
And as we all know, clams are idiots. Also, it was not Taekwondo. I did not learn Taekwondo.
Now, that would be a well-known Korean martial art.
It was well-known. Yeah, this one is not very well-known. Very kind of obscure.
Are you going to tell us, or is it a secret?
It's not a secret. It's Chaeyeon-roo.
Okay. Never heard of it.
Kim Soo founded that style. He's in that particular style, he's one of the 10th degree black belts, which I found really impressive. I got to meet him once. He came to our class and wrote my name in Korean down the side of, like.
Space Dragon says, don't deep water corals exist? So there are versions of coral that can exist deeper down on, can we call it deep water? But we do not have a lot of fossils of them, because basically once you get away from the near shore marine environment, it's basically vanishingly impossible. It's vanishingly unlikely that you're going to find any fossils there, because the deep sea, the actual oceanic crust, gets recycled very quickly on Earth. And so it tends not to last more than, like, few 100 million years, and often less. Most of the seafloor today that currently exists is less than 100 million. And so I was perhaps oversimplifying, but yeah, generally speaking, the fossil record of reef-building organisms as well as modern coral is shallow marine, and we have very, very few deep water marine fossil-bearing strata. Because if you think about it, how would you get that, right? The fossils in the deep ocean would have to form. Great, that's reasonable enough. But then they would have to survive, not be subducted, and also lifted up high enough that we could see them now, which basically just doesn't happen.
Kyle Pratt saying I was going all hipster with my martial arts. Like, oh, you probably haven't heard of it. Was I wrong?
No. But hey,
like, in the chat or whatever, any of you who had heard of Chionru karate before I mentioned it, let me know in the chat.
And we are going to take a quick break because it is about time for me to refresh this coffee because it's almost gone. So I will be right back, and in the meantime, you can enjoy the musical stylings of one Bent Hovind. And yeah, it'll be great. And we will be back in just a few minutes. Okay, we are back. So, want to say thank you, everyone, for basically making this channel possible. Because, yeah, we're doing the after the break quick little commercial. So, yeah, this channel is almost entirely supported directly through your guys' generosity. The people who like this and then bother to spend some of their hard-earned money to make sure I can keep doing it. If you are currently someone who is enjoying the channel and you have some extra money in your entertainment budget, and I really do mean you have some extra money. If you can't afford this, please do not give me any money. But if you do, and you are enjoying this, and you would like to help out by supporting the channel financially, there's the Patreon, is linked down in the description. Is where I get to keep the most of the money. It starts at only $1 a month. You can get a 15% discount if you go annually. So yeah, you can pay like a bit over $10 and get an entire year of Dapper Dinosaur early access and whatnot. And yeah, it gets you early access to my scripted videos. It gets you access to a Discord server where I am usually around. I'm not always chatting, but I'm keeping an eye on things at the very least. And if I'm tagged, I'm usually pretty quick to respond. And I am often there chatting. I mean, it's not always, but it is pretty frequent. The same is true if you join the channel. That starts at $1.99. Both the channel memberships and the Patreon have multiple tiers. Channel memberships are, there's a join button right below this video. If a monthly or an annual thing isn't really your cup of tea, but you still like to help out, there are other options. There's a wish list linked in the description that you can just get me a thing here or there. There's some books on there. There's a fancy gaming chair, because I feel weird buying it for myself, but if someone else bought it for me, I wouldn't feel weird at all. I just said thanks. There's also a merch store. If you look right below this video, there's a merch shelf. If you don't like any of that stuff, feel free to click through and it will bring you to the entire merch store where there's more stuff. Also, any of the shirts that you see on there, you can get them in multiple colors. So if you see a shirt and you're like, well, I don't like the color, click on the shirt and there will be a selection of colors that will be available. So yeah, if you see one you're like, oh, I don't like that shade of green, well, there's other shades available. So check that out. And finally, whether you're supporting financially, one quick free way to help out is to just like this video and share it around and watch a few of my videos in a row. And finally, if you would like to help out in yet another way that is not particularly costly, I also have instructions for how to render for me. My parts are primarily animated. That requires me to render them with 3D rendering software, which is a lengthy process. And so because I don't have the time to do it locally on my computer, I use a render farm. That render farm is free, but it works on a point-based system, where my frames are more likely to be rendered when I have more points. And I'm more likely to get assigned my own frames than I am other people's frames. So if you follow the instructions to render for me, you will do one of two things for me, both of which help. If I have frames to render, you will get those frames as a priority, and you will directly render frames for my animations. But if I don't have frames to render, or you can't handle the frames because your computer isn't quite good enough, which does happen, then you will get other people's frames, which will add to my point total, which will put my frames at a higher priority when other people render them, both of which are helpful. So if you're wanting to support in any of those ways, they're all greatly appreciated. My Unfinished Journey, who's been a member for 16 months and is at the Amniot level, says, space last week, busy Monday, but here with 3 times sharing and 5 times liking, support real science and mock pseudoscience. Absolutely. And here's play. Oh, but first, let's see. Utskea, or maybe Utskea? I'm going to go with Utskea for now. Says, Dapper, how the AIG labeled, or how the bag of dicks labeled AIG make it onto the set. So, like, if you mean in the set of emojis, basically AIG, the story with the AIG thing is they spent, this is a few years ago now, they spent months copyright claiming one at a time, not just by videos, but videos from numerous people. I think Gutsy Gibbon had copyright claims, I had copyright claims, Paul Enns from Paulogia had copyright claims, Godless Engineer, John had copyright claims.
Anyone criticizing them whatsoever.
I mean, for all I know, Professor Dave had some copyright claims.
Be surprised?
I wouldn't be surprised. Although at that point, I had never talked to him. So I've since met him in real life and been on a stream with him. So that was nice. But yeah, actually, oddly enough, I haven't met any of those other people I mentioned in real life. Not even Erica. Huh. But yeah, so basically that started as a meme because they were just doing that constantly. And so there was a period where every single day it felt like I was getting a new copyright claim because of some video that used some of their footage, including one copyright claim on a video of mine that used some of their footage in which they themselves were using footage from a Hollywood movie with fair use as their excuse, because I guarantee you they didn't license with the production company for that footage.
Nope.
They didn't license with a distributor for that footage. So yeah, that's why the whole bag of dicks thing came in. And if that is not the question you were asking, then I'm sorry, I must have misunderstood, and feel free to tag me and ask it a different way if that wasn't the question you were asking, and you don't have to super chat again. Astacanus lupus familiaris chihuahuensis Ryu, who's been a member for 16 months and is at the amulet level, says, weekly scientism fact. A pack of AIG is called a sausage fest.
And we all know sausages are trafe.
You can make chicken sausage.
I've had turkey sausage.
Yeah.
I like it.
So, is it the pork sausages?
Really good with
are
pancakes.
trafe? I don't think sausages are trafe. I think it's pork sausages.
Well, yeah, but when most people say sausage, it's pork by default most of you say.
Okay, that's fair.
That's why the modifiers like turkey and chicken.
Okay.
Because if I say chorizo, you're going to assume it's made out of pork.
Well, I mean,
They
that's
say soy or beef.
That's a very specific kind of sausage that I know to be.
But no, I'm just saying, like, sausage, if you just say sausage, people are...
Yeah, that's probably fair, yeah. Okay, that's fair.
It's like the word for coffee. It's hot. Unless someone says iced coffee, and then it's...
Actually, there are some chicken sausages that I quite like. I get them every once in a while, and I just cook them up like bratwursts.
Yeah, there's a
nice
secret...
urban spice blend that they put in there.
Whenever I go to Dragon Con, there's a cafe that stays open, like, the whole time. They're open 24/7, 365, like, kind of like Waffle House. And they have, like, a full menu that's there when it's not Dragon Con, and I happen to know about it because I've been going long enough to, like, go outside their Dragon Con hours. And they have turkey sausage, and I always ask for it whenever I go and get lunch.
Nice.
Yeah, I always tip handsomely because I've known some of the servers for
Nice.
10 years now. So.
All right, well, let's hear what this guy has
It's nice
to
to see.
say, because after this, that's it for this guy. We're done with him.
And so we see that reflected today. Wow. I did that to a radio announcer one time.
Wow.
What do you think about fossils? And I said, I think Darwin is exactly right about fossils.
You mean Darwin 1. Darwin 6, though, no. Get that guy out of here. The Darwin who knew more, who had seen more fossils, who was existing in a world where more fossils had been discovered, don't want to talk about that guy. That's why I cherry pick the first edition. I'm just taking another drink for that because I hate it. And the thing is, I don't think he knows that. I think he's copying other creationists. Because
DM Wing is asking me what makes kosher salt kosher. Salt is just kosher by default, but that's meant to tell you that it's the salt that people use to kosher meat.
Yeah, it drains the blood out.
Whenever you... Yeah, it drains the blood out. You wash and salt it.
Yeah.
For most of it.
It would probably be better labeled as kosher ring
Kosher
salt.
ring salt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you just hack off a piece of animal, that's not kosher because it's full of blood, and you need to drain that for it to be kosher.
Yeah, it's like a whole process. You're supposed to get the meat from a shochet, and they wash it and salt it or whatever. But it's like I don't get super. If it comes from a clean animal, I'm fine with it. Like obviously, when you drain the blood, when you're preparing it, that's enough for me. I don't really like really medium well or medium steaks.
Also, that red stuff that you see at the bottom of your steak package or your beef package, that's not blood. That is
muscle juice.
Yeah, that's myoglobin that has seeped out of the muscle cells, and it is not blood. It is red, but it's not blood.
Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, most meat that you buy in a Western grocery store is going to have had the blood drained out. Now, will it be as extensively as if you had gone to a kosher butcher? No, probably not. So,
to me, though, it's a reasonable amount for what you're trying. So,
well, watch out.
Again,
the
that's just a personal preference.
Come get you and put you
in
Jew jail.
That's something like I've talked to rabbis about. It's like, look, everybody knows the rules, but people just kind of do whatever they want. So. And Matthew K. No, kosher does not mean blessed by a rabbi. That is a common misnomer. It just means that whatever food processing facility has a rabbi there to check that certain procedures are followed, and if the procedures are followed, they put a little stamp on the labels. That's it.
And also, technically, the stamp doesn't... Not having a stamp doesn't mean it's not kosher. If you grow your own vegetables at home, and you're not putting, like, pork products on them or something... kosher garden. Like,
yeah, it just, there's very common, like, most of the kosher certification people are companies are run by, like, Orthodox rabbis because they have very strict, like, standards. So if you see a circle with a U in it, that's the Orthodox Union. If you see a star with a K in it, those are two of the popular.
Yeah.
Heck sure.
That's one of those things where it's like, hey, if those stringent guys say it's okay, then me, who cares a little bit less than they do, it's probably fine for me.
Yeah.
She said, oh, excuse me, I thought you were the creationist coming to the debate. said, I am the creationist. But I already, now she had to ask me, what do you mean? You believe Darwin was right about fossils? And then I had to tell her that.
Did you tell her that you were using the first edition and not the sixth edition, where Darwin was much more optimistic about fossils? No, I bet you didn't. Because again, I don't think this guy knows. Right? Like, this guy, as far as I know, is not like a biologist or a paleontologist or anything. I mean, he's wearing the shirt of Big Valley Creation Science Museum, which is some house in Alberta that got turned into a tiny little creation museum that has by the way, that fossilized teddy bear from last week, that's an exhibit in that museum. So, like, this guy
Amazing.
is...
Amazing.
And the thing is, like, I remember finding out, when I was still a young Earth creationist, that there was a book that creationists had published that was just a compilation of their own quote lines that they liked to use. That's it. The whole thing was just quotation and citation from front to back. I mean, sure, there was like an introduction and like an index or whatever, but the meat of the text was just quotation after quotation after quotation of quote mines. So that you don't even have to get your quote mine from the original source. You can check the quote mine like digest to get your quote mine.
Cherry picking
checked.
the book.
Right. Vandelli 1998 for 199 says, so the Jewish version of the FDA? I guess kinda. They're not really checking for safety.
I mean, because it's a very, like, because the thing is like the FDA, that's more about like food safety.
Yeah.
Whether or not you eat meat that's kosher or not doesn't really have anything to do with safety. It's just a very specific, like, way of eating. It's not, like...
You can have dangerous but kosher food. And you can have safe but not kosher food.
Yeah, and I've heard people, like, a very specific subset of evangelicals say that, like, oh, the kosher diet's more healthy. Like, not really. There's some foods in there that are kosher that are a lot more fatty or, like, salty or more cholesterol, whatever, than other stuff, but...
Yeah.
It's just an identity marker, so...
Yeah, it's... Yeah. Most religious dietary restrictions are not there for health reasons. They're just not.
No.
And most religious diets are not particularly healthy. Now, if you're someone who, likes things like fasting, then maybe following the fasting regulations of a religion, that might be good for you. I actually did read a study that looked at different fasting practices and did find that certain fasts were people who observed certain fasting traditions had like lower cholesterol on average than people who didn't, which I mean, but
also that's just like, that's something the medical community will tell you, because like when you fast, your body goes into a certain state where it processes like reserves that you've built up and things like that, so you have to do it like smart, and you don't just go, I'm gonna starve myself. Like, no. Don't do that.
Time that Hulk Hogan decided to go kosher for some reason? Because I do. That was weird.
Why?
I don't know. But he also just started to try to cook quote-unquote kosher food on his grill, on which he had just been previously grilling like pork sausages and pork chops and whatnot.
What?
And yeah.
Bro.
And then he was informed, like, dude, you got to at least
you gotta
the grill.
like, you have to completely clean and scrape and...
Yeah. That was on his weird TV show that only lasted like a few years, where like it was like a reality TV show about his life.
Of course.
And it was so weird. My Unfinished Journey for $5 says, Obstinate Sparrow, creationists aping other creationists while denying they are apes. Yes. Rana, Unwelcome Nuance Cave says, AIG is a national park's worth of hoodoos. AIG is a bag of dicks. And Mothra will take a drink for that. Thank you.
Yeah, speaking of Obstinate Sparrow, they said kosher to me usually just means more expensive. Like, yeah, that's a big reason I don't usually buy kosher certified meat. It's way expensive. And considering inflation and stuff like that, I can't afford to keep kosher meat in my fridge. Too much.
Yeah.
Being a Jew is expensive, man. It really is.
It is. I mean, all those little, like, various things that you're supposed to have around your house, they're
Children are freaking expensive. A shofar is expensive. Candlesticks can be cheap, but like, if you get ones that are hand-me-downs, usually like they're made out of silver, and that's expensive. A it's expensive. Like, basically all of our ritual items are expensive. It's just that's why we have a good Gerim Gemach for people that didn't inherit stuff, so they can get them from us.
Punk half dog half canine for $5 says, hello fellow good honest truth knowers. I have for sale a compilation of lies that you can use to win arguments. You know, to help spread the
Yeah.
truth. Exactly.
Yeah, basically.
Complex beginnings,
Yeah.
ecological transitions, rapid burial during Noah's flood.
Also, the rapid burial thing isn't true. We have numerous. In fact, actually, remember how earlier I was talking about the idea of a Lagerstätte, which is a particularly a fossil-bearing area that has particularly good preservation? Well, all of those are very, very, very slow deposition because they are all made of very fine-grained sediments, and the finer the sediment grain is, the more likely the Brownian motion of the water it's in is to overcome gravity, which means the slower it is to fall out of suspension, which also means that the higher energy the depositional environment is, the less likely it is to fall out of the water column at all, which means, generally speaking, in high energy events, you cannot get fine-grained sedimentation until everything calms down. And yet we have things like the extremely fine-grained lithographic limestone that Archaeopteryx is in, which is why it gets its name, Archaeopteryx lithographica. So what's lithography? Oh, that's writing or etching pictures into stone so that you can then stamp them on paper in like a printing press, right? But your ability to put letters or pictures into that is limited by the grain size of the stone. It's kind of like the resolution of the stone. The bigger it is, the harder it is. And so why was the quarry in Germany that Archaeopteryx was found in, why was it being mined in the first place? For lithography. Because it had such fine grain. It was exceptionally good for lithography. And how do you get fine, super fine grain limestone? It takes a while. That stuff deposits maximum about 2 centimeters every millennium. Maximum. So
that's slow as balls.
It really is. And so how did Archaeopteryx stay undecayed at the bottom of this body of water, depositing such slow depositing limestone? It was anoxic. There just wasn't much oxygen down there because the lagoon didn't have good circulation with the rest of the ocean. And so it was oxygen depleted. So the only thing down there to eat it was anaerobic bacteria, which have slower metabolisms than aerobic bacteria. Because the whole point of aerobic respiration is that it's faster. You get more energy per unit time. So, yeah, basically everything he's saying is just very obviously wrong. It's not like an interpretation, right? Like, oh, I think you can reinterpret this genetic data in some other way. It's just flat out incorrect. Star Song, I was being taken a drink for how bad it was. Star Song for $5 says, the fish that choked to death on its meal did not have to be buried rapidly. It just had to fall into an anoxic environment. Yeah, that's also the case. So in the same Lagerstätte, we also have seen things like fish who have choked on other fish, or there was even one that was like trying to capture a pterosaur, and they both died together, and it's not clear what killed them. But like, yeah, that's another thing, is creationists will point to these things where it's like, oh, hey, look, this fish was buried while it was finishing its last meal. It's like, or did it just die while it was
fell into an anoxic environment? So
right. Or they're like, oh, look, this ichthyosaur, it died while it was in the process of giving birth. Like, yes, because nothing ever dies while giving birth and then sinks. And also coffin birth is not a thing, even though it very, very much is a thing. Yeah. It's like they're going out of their way to misinterpret fossils. And the thing is, it's not like it even has to be a misinterpretation, right? You could say, hey, maybe that thing was buried in a sediment slump while trying to give birth. It's not impossible. But it's not the only option by a long shot.
Rapid formation of fossils, all of these things support those. God's word is the surest guide to understanding God's world. You know, it's not impersonal. You know, it's artwork. It's treasure. You know,
it's definitely not artwork.
And why isn't he a flat earther?
Yeah, there is that. But I have to drink for the fossil records artwork, because artwork has to be created intentionally as a piece of art. You don't just walk to the beach and then see like a rock and like, oh, that must be artwork. That's not how art works.
Things made, by God, the same God who made you. And he wants you to use these things like Jesus used object lessons to understand him better and your relationship to him.
No.
Yeah, I'll just let it go.
And boy, oh boy, fossils and that sequence of fossils really helps us. It points to creation, complexity in the beginning, corruption, death brought on by sin, catastrophe.
So if it points to all these things, why is it that the only people who seem to see these things in the fossil record are the people who already think
non-experts?
They're non-experts, or they're people, and they're people who are already committed to those things being true anyway, regardless of what the fossils say, right? Because remember, if your reason for believing this is your prior religious commitment, which it is in pretty much every case I've ever found, I've seen a few people who kind of claimed otherwise, but I haven't really been able to check into things. And even if they're being honest about that, which I have questions about, it's still a vanishingly rare event. The vast majority of people who come to the conclusion of young Earth creationism do not do so because of the evidence. They do so because of prior religious commitments. So why is it that that's the case? And why is it that you have far more people going from being young Earth creationists to examining the evidence to then rejecting young Earth creationism, if not necessarily their religion as a whole, versus people who look at the evidence and are like, oh, gee, I guess this points to Jesus the whole time. Thanks, Archaeopteryx, for pointing me to Christ. Which isn't a thing that happens. If these things actually pointed in that direction, then that would be what would tend to happen when people examine the evidence, right? And it's the same thing with all sorts of other conspiracy theories. There's a reason that when you dig into the people who believe conspiracy theories, like the flat earth or anti-vax or whatever, you tend to find people who are deeply incurious, deeply credulous about things that confirm their biases, and absurdly skeptical about things that disconfirm their biases. They're not clear and rational critical thinkers. And it's the same deal here. If the evidence actually pointed towards vaccines causing autism, then that's what the science would say. That's what the papers would say. They don't. If there was actually good evidence that 9/11 was an inside job, that would be the typical actual explanation, because there would be evidence. But that's not the case. There is no evidence of those things.
Noah's flood, but most importantly, it tells us about deliverance. The whole world is covered with layer upon layer of these fossils, and yet here we are, because God provided a way of escape. Not just a way of escape.
Are they ending the show? Is this shorter than I thought it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or there's a transition, I don't know.
I mean, we still have like 28 minutes left.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know,
so
maybe
like
there's a transition.
of the video. Meldaborn, who's been a member for 22 months and is at the sore opposite level, says, if the guy in the video was misinformed by other more knowledgeable, aka more dishonest creationists, there's more evidence for the creationist rule of two. Yeah, I do think that this guy is more likely in the honest and creationist section of the triangle, and not the creationist and knowledgeable, but not honest section. Because this guy does not strike me as someone, for one thing, I've never heard of him before. So he's not going around in like, high-level creationist circles. This guy is less of a thought leader in creationism than, say, Sal Cordova is, who's already not exactly a thought leader in creationism.
It's an understatement.
Look, Sal has done some actual professional creationist publication, right? That's more than most creationists ever do. I would not call him a thought leader, but he's certainly higher tier.
I mean, Andrew Snelling is on record as lying and hiding evidence that disproves the stuff that he tells people in a church, even though he's actually done geology.
Yeah. Well, Andrew Snelling, for me at least, Andrew Snelling is like a particularly reprehensible version of the dishonest creationist, where it's just so blatant.
Yeah.
And he's doing it so obviously, and in ways that, like, I don't even think things like cognitive dissonance or like things like that can even really cover. Pibblepunk for $5 says, possibly the most harmful part of young Earth creationism is the insistence that anyone who disagrees with them is part of the big atheist conspiracy. Yeah. Actually, very early on in my time on YouTube, I was asked, do you think creationism is a conspiracy theory? And at the time I said no, because I didn't remember myself as a creationist believing in any particular conspiracy. But then I realized,
say it is.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is I now think it is, because the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the only reason I didn't think about those things is because I didn't think about it deeply. I didn't think what the implications were of young Earth creationism, which is that basically all of science is a conspiracy against the Bible.
Yeah, I can straight up tell you that when I was deep into young Earth creationism and all that stuff, I was in a very conspiratorial mindset, because you have to believe that stuff is being hidden to cover up the truth, and that's exactly the same way that flat Earth works, that anti-vax works, that anti-authoritarianism, all that stuff works.
Yeah.
It's just going to overlap with all the other conspiracies at some point.
Yeah, it is. And I think I was
They always
wrong
end
when I
up
said no.
going into the same, like, right-wing, anti-authoritarian, or anti-intellectual,
Yeah.
anti-Semitism,
Look,
all that other stuff. Like,
conspiracy theories, they're like potato chips. Is it physically possible to eat one potato chip and stop? Yes.
Yeah.
Is it physically possible to believe one conspiracy theory and then stop? Yes. Is that what typically happens in either of those cases? No.
Nope.
No. I have never in my life
Overwhelmingly no.
ate one potato chip and then left. I grab a handful of potato chips or a bowl of potato chips and I eat the whole thing. Or I eat like an entire sleeve of the what you call it? Now I can't remember them.
Pringles?
Yeah.
Or the Ritz crackers? Like,
No, the
yeah, I'll eat an
Pringles.
entire can of Pringles in one sitting. I'll just...
Yeah. If I buy Pringles, that's going to have to be like dinner for that day.
Yeah.
It's good. That's a meal.
Pressed potato flakes. Mmm.
So, you know, you say pressed potato flakes and it sounds terrible, but then I eat them and I'm like, nope, this is great.
And how many other chips work so well as, like, duck bills? You know? Come on.
None.
Eternal realm with him.
Let all creation rejoice before the Lord, for he comes to judge the earth. He will judge the world in righteousness, and the peoples in his faithfulness.
Mountaintop during the year of
Hope
Noah
not.
fossils. Straight
Okay, so this was just a transition. Okay.
Yeah, it was like a commercial break or something. Okay. I was going to say, I remember there being more of this because I did skim through it when I was
I was going to say, there is an exception to the one chip rule, and it's usually the ghost pepper chips.
The one chip
ones that come with like one in a packet.
Yeah.
So
But also, to be fair, I did say potato chips, and those are tortilla chips. So technically,
yeah,
my point stands. So yeah. Also, I've never actually been able to find one of those in a place where I could purchase it to try it. I always wanted to, but like they were just never around. So I remember even during that, like the big promotion, where like, oh, it's the one chip challenge. You know, I bought some of the chips from the same brand, but like they just didn't have any of those one chips around. It was very disappointing. Anyway.
Well, diagrams.
Oh. Astacanus lupus familiaris chihuahuensis Ryu for $4.99 says banana chips work well, I think. I mean, I don't think I've ever had a single banana chip, and I do love banana chips. Banana chips are great. In fact, I should put... No, it's not banana chips, but I should put plantains on my shopping
oh
list.
my god, I love platanos.
Yeah,
they're so good.
They really are. And I haven't had them in such a long time. I think it's probably been like 6 or 7 years. And they're so good. I should put
my favorite restaurant on the planet is back in Birmingham. They have the best cheese dip I've ever eaten in my life. Their taco meat is flavored just to perfection, but they have plantain that they'll serve, and it's so sweet, delicious, soft cheese. They firm up like bananas Foster, and it's just
for me, the ideal fried plantain has that crispy exterior and then the fluffy, almost like
chewy inside.
Yeah, and like just like the right amount of salt to help with the. Oh my god,
it's the perfect palate cleanser when you're dealing with like something really acidic and savory, like taco meat or whatever, and you just switch to a plantain.
So good. Vandali 1998 for $4.99 says, do young Earth creationists like Snelling still secretly, quote-unquote, publish in real journals like they did before going to AIG, or have they all gone all the way insane? So it varies from person to person, and they're usually not very secret about it. They usually just openly publish under their real name, which is usually a requirement in most journals anyway, that you publish under your real name, which is another reason why Raw Matt's paper would never have been accepted by PLOS One, because he said it was Raw Matt who wrote the paper, which isn't a real name. His name is Matt Nyler, which is not a secret. I'm not doxing him. It's on his book that he advertises as Raw Matt. They're all written by Matt Nyler. So that's not me doxing him. He wants people to know his name. But yeah.
My sister said I'm making her hungry, no regrets.
Yeah. Now I feel like I need, or at least some kind of Mexican.
And about half of the pictures come from fossils in our museum down in Florida.
You know what's amazing?
Wait, our museum?
Living in Southern California, where I can just walk down to my local like Walmart and they just sell plantain. Just right there.
I mean, they sell
like,
it
I
at the
don't have to go
grocery
through
store.
any special. Yeah, but that's like a very regional specific thing. You
Yeah,
can't
it's
just walk
true.
into any grocery store and get plantain. So
Actually,
very nice.
it is regional, but I've very frequently lived in places where you could. Like when I lived in Massachusetts,
Mhm.
I lived in a place with a lot of Puerto Rican people who would move there.
Yeah.
And so the grocery stores also had a lot of plantains because they're popular in Puerto Rico. Too.
Yeah, when they figure out that like they have a very specific ethnic demographic that they'll cater to, like they'll stock it up.
Yeah, but I imagine if I was to like go to Wisconsin, the plantains would be scarce on the ground.
Yeah, I would not expect to find them in just random neighborhood Walmart.
But maybe I could find some lye-soaked fish because for some reason that's a thing people decide to eat. You don't know about lutefisk?
Okay.
Oh, well, I'm going to ruin your day later. Trust me.
Please don't. I'm okay.
A double page spread that compares, the evolutionary belief about fossils with the creation belief. How all of these fossils or the remains of plants.
Notice that one of those is science. The other one's just theological beliefs.
It's barely even theological beliefs, right? Like, what is happening on the right here? So we've got the Cambrian down at number 1 in the deepest water, which doesn't make sense because we have shallow.
Why does it start with the Cambrian? There was stuff before the Cambrian.
I'm going to take a drink because, wow, this is crazy.
That's terrible.
So it's going through the geological periods as they're talked about in North America. And so, hold on. Does this guy think that he's got Cretaceous, Tertiary, and Quaternary? But does that mean that he thinks that like the fossils of woolly mammoths are from the flood? Because most creationists have a like end Cretaceous
it's post-flood ice age.
Yeah, I'll say that's post-flood ice age because their cutoff is usually the end of the Cretaceous.
Wait, no, because Kent Hovind, part of his Hovind theory is that a comet struck the Earth and then a lot of the more extreme latitudes flash froze, which is why he's like, oh yeah, the mammoths were flash frozen standing up with food still in their stomachs. So at least some of them, yeah.
Yeah, and actually like AIG, which is, they're the big leaders in creationism today at least. They put their flood boundary at the end of the Cretaceous because that's where Andrew Snelling puts his flood boundary, even though he will use later, like, even Eocene lakes to provide fossils as evidence that only a flood could cause these fossils. Yeah, he's dishonest about that too, but like, he's the reason that most creationists are Cretaceous are the end of the flood. So that's very interesting. So like, he's got moas over here, and like, but they're in Tertiary, even though like moas didn't go extinct until like 10,000 years ago or something. And like,
I was gonna say they were contemporary with like what we'd consider modern humans.
Yeah, the ancestors of the Maori who first came to New Zealand not that long ago in terms of like geological history, or even just the history of the humans as a species, they encountered moas. Astacanus lupus familiaris schwauensis review for $4.99 says lutefisk is delicious, Vish. What do you mean? Definitely doesn't taste like an unsalted AIG. And which then makes me immediately think, wait, do they taste better salted? Is that like a thing? Because never heard about that, but what do I know? Star Song for $5 says, if you give Ray Comfort a wild banana, I'm pretty sure he won't want to eat it. Yeah, probably not. The undesigned banana?
Yes, the one that humans definitely didn't spend like hundreds of years cultivating. And
well, I mean, those bananas do still exist. And you know what? People don't tend to eat them because they're basically just a bag of seeds. Yeah,
same thing with watermelons. That's why you look like watermelons in medieval art. You're like, what are these? Like abominations! They
Honestly,
don't even look, they just look like alien fruit, and now we're like, oh, we're used to seeing lots of red fruit and like only tiny seeds in the center.
Also, prickly pears are like that. They're just full of seeds, even though I do love them. But the thing is, I usually don't just bite into them. I juice them. And then I use the juice in other drinks. So I don't normally just bite into a prickly pear because they're full of seeds. And also, you need to take the skin off because the skin are full of what are called glochids. Because cactus have two kinds of spines. They have the big spines, and then they have the smaller glochids, which are like hooked or barbed, and they'll stick into you. And they're like very hard to see because they're so thin and tiny. And they will just stick into your skin for days, and you'll be trying to pick at them, and you won't get them because you can't get a good grip because they're so tiny. And so yeah.
Oh yeah, there's the whole banana discourse about like Michelle versus Cavendish bananas, and like how your grandparents will complain about how like bananas taste like crap now. They used to be sweet, Things that are supposed to be banana flavored don't taste like real bananas, and that's why. It's because like the used to be the most popular species of banana, like really got hit hard with soil, which is actually, if we don't figure something out, it's probably going to take out the Cavendish too. So.
Yep. So by the way, if you do want to eat a prickly pear, and you get a whole prickly pear from a store or from a cactus or something, first, if you're picking it yourself, wear gloves. Second, if you're handling it from the store, wear gloves and do one of two things. You can burn the glow kits off by just putting the prickly pear and turning it pretty quickly in a fire because they're so thin and they're usually bone dry, they're very flammable. Or you can just wear gloves and peel the skin and then just eat the flesh and toss that skin away. Do not touch the skin of a prickly pear with your bare hands if you can avoid it.
Animals that lived at the same time
who are working with chilies, and then they like rub their eyes or something, and you're like, no.
Different places, and were rapidly buried one after the other from sea bottom to mountaintop during the year of Noah's flood. In that example I used of the Nautilus, several pictures of those are in here. Other things that you'll hear evolutionists talk.
Is this a commercial for his book?
Probably.
Okay. I will say, like, based on what I can see, I like the design of this book. It looks like it is reasonably well designed to communicate his ideas to kids. So whoever designed it, I think, did a reasonably good job. Unfortunately, it's just teaching kids nonsense. So, like, not great.
About and how the rest of the story points away from evolution toward creation.
I would love to hear one thing that actually stands up to scrutiny that points away from evolution and towards creation. And by that I mean special creation. If you have some idea about an argument for general creation, okay, fine, whatever.
Building blocks in earth science talks about the eruption of Mount St. Helens.
Why does it look like Microsoft made that?
It probably did.
Microsoft, please don't tell me you guys made a Earth Science Creationist kids book.
Details about Grand Canyon at Mount St. Helens. Scientists from all over the world.
Oh no! He said Grand Canyon and Mount St. Helens in the same breath. So now we have to talk about that.
I love it.
Here's a drink. PK says, anyone know a place to order any the new Pepper X? I want to try them. I don't know where to get those. I actually don't know that I would like them very much because while I do really like spicy things, people who I've heard talk about Pepper X say that there's essentially no flavor left in Pepper X. It's just spice.
I'm out of the loop. What is Pepper X?
Oh, Pepper X is the newest, hottest pepper.
Oh, why did my brain think that was Dr. Pepper? Like a new flavor of Dr. Pepper. Why?
I don't know. Maybe that's Elon Musk was brought on board to create a new Dr. Pepper flavor, and he named it Pepper X.
He made Pepper X. It tastes like ass.
It probably is actually what it would taste like. Okay, so Grand
also,
Canyon...
if anybody can just quickly Google for me whether or not the hard Baja Blast is available in Metro Atlanta, I need that for reasons in about a month.
It's very specific.
That's a Dragon Con drink if I've ever heard of one. That's the best option I've heard since Four Loko came out. So yeah, let's go.
Actually, they're caffeine free.
Interesting. Okay, well, it might not be the best Dragon Con drink because we really do need stuff with a lot of caffeine.
You can always
That's a 24/7, 5-day straight con.
Yeah. So anyway, so when it comes to the Grand Canyon and Mount St. Helens, so the connection the creationists like to draw here is that there is a river that runs from the mountains where Mount St. Helens is downstream called the Toutle River. Now, after the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens, there was a lot of ash that was put over what's now where the Toutle River is. And that ash is still largely unconsolidated. And it does have laminate within it, so if it ever does become tough, it will be laminated tough, which, sure, whatever. But the Toutle River quickly carved channel through this unconsolidated ash because it's unconsolidated. So obviously it's very quick. It's like if you had a bunch of baby powder on a tilted tray and you poured water at the top, would you be surprised that the water wiped down most of the baby powder from the top? No, of course not, because it's just a bunch of powder. That's what that ash is. And so they like to compare the fact that happened over the course of only a couple of years or so to the Grand Canyon, which conventionally is thought to have taken several million years to form. Although exactly how many million is a bit up in the air.
You gotta have stuff packing it down. But of course they don't.
Right. And so that is one of the things. Well, there's also the fact that the gorge by the Toutle the Toutle River, has relatively low slope walls because a bunch of unconsolidated ash cannot support steep slopes without collapsing, which is what happens if it ever, digs down too steeply. Whereas the Grand Canyon has multiple near vertical sections of the Grand Canyon, which means they had to be lithified before the water could erode the canyon at that point, which means that it had to erode through solid rock, which means it could not have happened as quickly as the gorge at the Toutle River formed by Mount St. Helens. So basically, creationists are looking at like a runoff channel that you might find if you poured out a bucket of water at the beach and watched the sand wash down, and they're comparing that to an actual canyon with hard stone walls, with vertical walls faces in some cases. They're not really comparable. The only thing they have in common is that they're both erosional features. Which, yeah, that's true. But not everything that's erosion is the exact same thing.
Photographed. Geology on steroids, the rapid formation of canyons, a rapid formation of rock layers, rapid formation of fossils, rapid formation of, coal seams and polystrate fossils.
Also, Whimsy and Whisker says, new to love, but not content. I love it. Dapper Dinosaur, thank you and welcome. I don't believe I've seen you on one of these live streams before, so I hope that you are enjoying yourself.
And photographed
K.
by Sinus.
Sorry.
Says, according to Google, you can get hard Baja Blast at Hooters in Georgia because of course it's available in Georgia.
Interesting.
Where else? By the way, best key lime pie that I've had outside like a bakery, Hooters.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, now you have to get yourself to the Hooters in Georgia. Okay.
Around the world. And God just showing them evolution doesn't make any sense. Look at your own film. Look at what you've seen. I've shown it to you right here. So you are what? Without excuse. This is a lot of those ideas. And
the whole without this excuse thing is a... Okay, I'm going to take a drink because I hate it. And I'm going to talk about how it's being used. And
this is making me want to scream.
Okay, so the you are without excuse thing, it is not a way to get people who don't agree with you about your version of Christianity to believe it, to accept your ideas, to convert to your version of Christianity. All it is a way for the Christians who already believe this stuff to feel better about themselves, about the fact that basically no one takes them seriously. Because they say, look, it's not that we're not right. It's not that we don't have good arguments. It's not that this doesn't make sense. It's that these people know it's true, but they just don't want to admit it. And so I don't have to worry about that fact. I don't have to worry about the fact that I can't convince people. Because normally, that would be a time to pause, right? If you think you're right about something, but you can't get anyone else to get on board at all, that should be a red flag for you. You should stop and think, what is it about my idea or my articulation of my ideas that are so unconvincing? In fact, actually, not that long ago, you found a video, and I might still be trying to get that guy whose video you found on my channel to have a discussion, and it's the octotheism guy. I want to talk to that guy. And one of the questions I want to ask him is, have you ever convinced anyone of any of this stuff? And I expect the answer to be no.
Octotheism, man, guys, it really got me. I'm like, I gotta send this to
look, I don't even know if this is a preview of things to come, because I don't think he's actually going to come on, because I haven't been able to really engage with him much in his comments. But there's a guy who has decided that on the basis of color theory and which glass is supposed to compose parts of the throne of God in Revelation, as well as some numerology stuff based on Revelation and the book of Daniel, that he's discovered that there are actually 8 spirits of God, and we only know the names of 3 of them, and then the other 5 he has definitions for, and he can prove this mathematically, you guys. And also, Satan has 8 different spirits in him, and they're the opposite of the ones that God has. It's just there's this whole convoluted thing.
Isn't this just the long way around to Kabbalah?
I mean, maybe. Although this guy clearly doesn't know any Hebrew or Greek or anything.
Well, I mean, that goes without saying. Most of the people who come up with this crap They don't know anything like that. But yeah, this just sounds like dollar store Kabbalah.
Yeah, I mean, it might be.
Oh, toad thieves.
And yeah, I want to try to get that guy on the channel. I want to talk to him. But yeah, this is just a cope for that kind of thing. We're just like, oh, they're without excuse. You're just taking that verse of the Bible and using it to cope.
Yep,
And the thing is,
cope.
it's so obvious to anyone who doesn't already think the way you do that it's just cope.
You know how the gospel's reflected in fossils. For young people, this is the most popular book we ever wrote, Dry Bones and Other Fossils. Sometimes I'll see a college student bring up one of these books that his mom read to him when he was 3 and he read it when he was 5, you know.
So these books that you have here, how can people get a hold of them?
The Saskatchewan Creation Society, you know, maintains some of these that available for purchase. We have them at...
Well, there you go, guys. Now you know how to get his Creationist Kids books. Saskatchewan, or the Creation Science of Saskatchewan Incorporated. So wait, is it a for-profit group? Because usually when I see incorporated, I think it's for-profit. Kind of weird.
Well,
Sorry, Canadians. I don't think you can get a tax break for donating to that guy.
conferences we go to. Master...
I once did donate to a nonprofit Klingon language organization and put that on my taxes.
of course you did.
It was only like $10 and it was just to get the pin. But like I did it and I took that off my taxes that year.
No one's surprised.
Yeah, they shouldn't be. Then I also gave to UNICEF that one time, and then the UNICEF just gave all of that stuff to the government of Pakistan, who decided to differentiate who they would help in the flooding and the resulting like famine by religion, which I wasn't a fan of. They're like, okay, we're going to only give this to our Muslim citizens. And the thing is, like, look, I wanted to help those people, but I also wanted to help any like Hindus or Christians or Jews or Zoroastrians who might have been around. And the government was just like, no, but thanks for the money. And I was pretty pissed off about that.
I would be too.
Yeah.
Because like the floods like don't discriminate.
Yeah.
So
yeah. He sends the flood waters on the Muslims and the Christians alike.
Books can send these out. They've got a real easy 800 number.
Oh no, that middle one is definitely an animation book.
Oh no.
Yeah, it is.
Oh,
there's a bunch of kids pointing at what otherwise might be interpreted as the Star Child from 2001: A Space Odyssey, but you know that's not what it is.
Yikes.
So Obstinate Sparrow says, not cool UNICEF. I actually don't blame UNICEF. I blame the government of Pakistan. Because what is UNICEF going to do? What, are they going to invade Pakistan and distribute their own aid? Like, that's just not a realistic option. It's not like UNICEF has an army or something. So, yeah. Proposed ring trigger shilling. This isn't shilling, though, right? Because technically, if you're a shill, you're supposed to not be open about the fact that you're advertising some product. You're supposed to do it, like, on the DL so that people think it's just a natural endorsement. So, like, every once in a while, I'll say, like, oh, hey, I just got this game or something. I really like it. I'm not shilling because no one's paying me to do that. But if someone paid me to advertise for that game, and then I disclosed that I was advertising, still not shilling. But if I was paid to advertise, and didn't disclose that that's what was going on, but tried to keep it like it was just me randomly endorsing something, that's when you're technically shilling.
I think that works up here, too.
Yeah.
Oh, can anyone check Gary Parker and see if he actually has any credentials? Because they called him Dr. Gary Parker, but we all know that when you call a creationist a doctor, that could mean anything.
Probably degree in theology or apologetics or something like that.
Okay.
Highly doubt it's in a STEM field.
Yeah, 800-999.
Anything besides commercials?
One of my favorite books. And so this is a complete zoo adventure, a field trip in a book. And it's the publisher, Master Books, did beautiful animal pictures and, human interest pictures, field guide for parents, homeschool parents, Christian school teachers, anybody interested.
I got to say, I was homeschooled for a few years, and my parents are Christian, but I am glad that they did not get any of these, like, explicitly creationist type materials. We just got, like, books that had been purchased by public school. Because my dad was working in the public school system. And so, basically, the reason we were homeschooled is because even though Massachusetts has a pretty good, education ranking, and has for a very long time, right? It's usually close to number one in the country, if not actually number one. But Where we specifically lived, that was less the case. We did not live in the wealthiest part of Massachusetts because for some reason in the United States, it has just become the default that the way that schools are funded is by property taxes, which means that the lower the property values are, which also tends to correlate with overall poverty, the less well-funded the schools are, which basically means that how good your school is directly tied to how much money your family has. Which,
yeah, this is why you shouldn't take people seriously who are like, everyone has the same opportunities and racism doesn't exist, and like, this is why you just slap them in the face and go, structural racism exists. Here's how.
Triceratops says he has a unspecified degree from Baylor. At least it's a real school. All right, so we're going to start wrapping up here.
Yeah, but what? It just says a degree, it doesn't say what field.
Yeah, I guess not. Which means to me that it's probably
Baylor is like a Christian university, technically. But...
yeah, but it's an accredited one, at least.
Well, yeah, I'm just saying, like, why wouldn't you specify?
I mean, probably because it has nothing to do with anything to do with science.
Yeah.
He's probably got a bachelor's degree in, like, communication or business or something that's completely unrelated.
Watch him be an engineer.
Yeah, well, maybe an engineer. Jeez.
Yeah.
Look, if you're watching this and you're an engineer and you're like, hey, that's not me. No, I get it. Most engineers aren't like this. However, when you come to a creationist who's going on about how they have science credentials and whatnot, it's almost always an engineering degree. It's almost never an actual science degree. And
AIG says Dr. Gary Parker, MS, Biology, Physiology, Ball State.
Hey, I'm kind of surprised he has a biology degree. That's
me too.
Shocking. He hasn't evinced any significant knowledge of biology, but hey, what do I know? But also, like, it's time to start wrapping things up. It's 56 past.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. We're not coming back to this guy so we can continue his book commercial. Sorry to him. Although I do like that salamander down at the bottom of the right-hand page. I think it's a cute little guy. I like the patterns. It's very, very neat. Yeah. But then again, I do kind of like salamanders overall. So, Vishanti, you got anything coming up that you want to tell us about?
Coming up is a little dicey, but I did put out my first video as promised. It came out last Sunday morning. It is a review of one of the best Doctor Strange issues. So go watch it if you haven't. You can listen to me natter about comics. I do have a lot of things being scripted in progress, but neurodivergent, so I don't finish one. I always like start a million and then just work on a piecemeal. So, But hey, at least I got over that. Yay!
All right. So
2 years late.
Oh, and for $5, Pillowpunk Half Dog Half Canine says, "Weird how the system was intentionally designed so some people have more and better opportunities than others. That way, we should have a word for that. Yeah, we should have a word for that. We should come up with something.
Yeah, we should.
We'll brainstorm it later.
Mm-hmm.
So what is coming up here on this channel? So let's see. On Tuesday, Vishanti and I will be back. We will be doing a Dapper Reacts Tuesday edition. Then on, let's see, Thursday, we got 2 videos. 2 videos in one day. First, there's going to be the premiere of The Messenger of Science, which is basically my first in a 5-video series about Sabur Ahmed and the guy who goes by the Muslim Lantern. Professor Dave did already do a fairly lengthy, sort of like off-the-cuff reaction to them as like a live stream or something, I think. And he actually did that after I had already gone through most of my script for this. And so we did chat about that a little bit. And so I did not watch his video until after I was done with my script because I wanted to make sure that there was no like cross-pollination of ideas there. And after seeing it, we do make different points. We do talk about different aspects of how wrong they're getting things. So I do still think that my take is going to be a nice addition to that whole thing. I don't think that I'm going to have Sabur lie about offering me a trip to London. It'd be nice.
Yeah. Did he actually offer a trip to London, or did he just say the UK? Because I remember him offering UK, and I think maybe Dave assumed it was London.
I thought I heard him say come to London, but maybe I'm wrong about that. But I also know
UK,
that he said we would have a debate, and then the offer that he sent to Professor Dave was like
was for 3 dates that he didn't confirm.
Yeah, stay for a week and a half, and we'll have 3 different debates. And I was like, what
Yeah, and they still haven't reached out about like travel plans and
Right.
all that stuff. So yeah, I'm not surprised.
It was all, I mean, it was never a serious offer.
Of course.
It was
Yeah.
performative so that they could then show that to their people who trust them to not do things just performatively. They see, this atheist is a coward and he backed out, which is not what ever happened. Anyway, so yeah, that's coming up on Thursday, but that's at noon. So that's going to go from roughly noon Pacific to about 1 p.m. Pacific. But then at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, we're actually going to be doing Jackson with Jackson that day. So that'll be on Thursday. Also on Wednesday, we should be doing Power Rangers. Also this Saturday, tomorrow, Sunday, at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, we should also be doing Power Rangers over on Top Hats Off if you like the Power Rangers Jungle Beast Let's Play. That should be episodes 38 and 39. So we only have, 4 more episodes total of that RPG. That's it. So,
Dang.
we're almost done. So with that being said, that takes us all the way to Saturday, which we will be doing another, I'll at least be doing another Dapper Reacts. I'll check with Vishanti closer to the day to see if she wants to hang out with that. And we will be probably doing a follow-up to what we talk about on Tuesday, because that video is a little bit longer than this one and should probably have at least 3 or 4 episodes that we can get out of it. So, with that being said, once again, thank you so much to everyone who's supporting. I really appreciate it. You guys continually surprise me with how generous you are and how much you guys really value what I'm trying to do for you. So with that being said, I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your weekend. If you're interested, over on my Discord channel, we are going to be watching 4 episodes of Power Rangers Mystic Force, just as a hangout and watch a thing. And with that, yeah, we're out of here. Talk to you later, everybody.
Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Ben Tovand, Phil Ravara, Tapioca Weasel, Whispers, John Ackerman, Strawberry Vein, Dr. Tapioca Weasel, Elaround Teller, Horseflesh, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostick Van Manen, Landon Knoll, Mabdy Babbity, Sphincter of Doom, and Ballas. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 10% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.